the bones and in the back. Each to cover to Malik and Mystic.
Make life worth living.
Friendship between Austria and France must be cemented by marriage. My youngest daughter, Antoinette, will be Queen of France.
It is a custom that the bride retain nothing belonging to a foreign court.
You represent the future. All eyes will be on you.
She looks like a child. So, I've heard you make keys as a hobby?
Yes.
It'd be interesting to see how long she lasts.
What on earth is going on with that young couple?
It's a disaster.
This is ridiculous.
This, madame, is Versailles.
I'm afraid the Queen has a somewhat artistic temperament.
It's not too much, is it?
Oh, no.
She spends like mad.
People of France are hungry.
The King and Queen are complete blunderers.
Don't they ever get tired of these ridiculous stories?
Can't you do something?
I'm not going to acknowledge it.
She was in the shrubs at dawn with various men.
He has quite a reputation.
She's a terrible queen.
Letting everyone down would be my greatest unhappiness.
The Bastille fortress was stormed.
There's a mob of hundreds on their way.
Hello, and welcome back to OK Classic Cinema. I'm your host, Christian Garcia, and I'm joined by my effervescently beautiful and gorgeous co-host, Luke Delmar. And today we have two very special guests, one returning and one just coming on to our little pod scene here. We know Ashley here. She was on our very last episode of Marie Antoinette Part 1. And we have Cullen here from Not My Fantasy Podcast, coming on to discuss. Luke, what are we going to talk about today?
We are talking about Marie Antoinette 2006.
Oh.
Our first go-round with this movie was the 1938 black and white classic starring Norma Shearer, and now we jump forward many, many decades to beautiful color with the lovely Kirsten Dunst as our titular leading lady. But welcome back, Ashley, and welcome, Colin. It's so wonderful to have guests. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We both waited for the other to speak first and then spoke at the same time. Classic. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I was on Cullen's podcast. We talked about The Amazing Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland. And now I invited him on to be on this podcast as well. So I wanted to make sure that he got his flowers because he's also a big history nerd. And I wanted him to be on the first one for Norma Shearer's, but he wasn't able to schedule conflicts. But this one, I wanted to make sure that he was on.
I'm a big Marie Antoinette head, if you will.
Unintended.
Unintended.
Yeah,
I've seen obviously both the Norma Shearer and this movie. I also watched the anime and an anime movie. It's like the only anime I've really watched, The Rose of Versailles, about Marie Antoinette. Very interesting queer stuff going on in that one. And like gender, because there's like a woman who's raised as a man, but everyone knows she's a woman is like the lead character. It's very interesting. I watched the PBS show. I read the Antonia Fraser biography and the Stefan Zweig Portrait of an Ordinary Woman biography. And I've been to Versailles a couple times. I love traveling, so I've been to Paris twice. And the first time I saw like the palace and I tried to see everything. It was exhausting. So the second time we just only did the village and the Petit Trianon because like we had seen the palace and we'd seen the village a little bit, but we want to see it more. So, yeah.
And Ashley, you've been there too, as well.
I have, yes, just the one time, but like you said, it is a lot. You can spend all day and all night there.
Yeah, it's a lot to see. And then I think you mentioned how it wasn't there. I was just there in May, but it wasn't open yet. The 20th anniversary of this movie, they're doing a bunch of the costumes and stuff on display in Versailles. And the first time I was there was the Olympics. So they had like all the horse racing stuff, all the equestrian, that's the word I'm looking for, was on the Versailles grounds. Because it's like, there's like the town and then there's the palace and there's like all these grounds and these gardens and they're just huge. And then there's the Grand Trianon, the Petit Trianon, the Petit Hameau, and they're all big. It's crazy.
I'm just so like I'm sure that both of you know this as well, but I'm just surprised that given what was happening during the French Revolution, that we still have it. That the commoners didn't like burn the place to the ground or something like out of like anger or frustration. That we still actually have the palace and all of its grounds preserved. I'm impressed that that still exists today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is crazy. I mean, because eventually I guess the royal family was removed from there and it was abandoned. And then Napoleon lived in it for like a hot minute, I think. And they kept trying to figure out how to reuse it until eventually it became this museum. And now they have like the masks and the balls. Like have so many different events that you can go. If I won the lottery, that's how you would know. You'd see me at one of those events. Because they're so expensive, but they look so cool to see the sunrise at Versailles like they do in this movie. And it's really impressive, but I think they started to see it as their cultural legacy and their history, not just like the establishment that had been oppressing them. And it is that gorgeous. Like after you see Buckingham Palace, you're like, compared to Versailles, this is chopped. Like,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, like sorry, Camilla.
I love that. It's hysterical. Because Ashley, didn't you tell us back when we did our first episode that it used to be a hunting lodge of all places before it was turned into a palace?
Yeah, so that is in more recent history of what Versailles is today, probably preserved to what it ended up being. But that was with King Louis the 14th. Mm-hmm. So between King Louis the 16th, which would have been Marie's husband, that's a very small time frame for it to have become what it was. And I don't even remember all the renovations that Louis the 14th had. I don't even think it was all fully finished when he died. I think they were still working on pieces of it after he died, or adding to it the village and stuff like that. I think the village did exist, but I think in terms of its whole stature, the gardens and all of the like pipe work and aqueduct work for all the fountains, and that was new technology, modern technology back then. So that was like a real big feat that courts of other countries, even if they didn't particularly love the French, considered it like highly advantageous to send diplomats, to send like higher born aristocrats in their society to stay there for however long they could, even if it was a short visit, and coming back with all of that knowledge and the grandeur. I mean, it certainly still lives up to the name just from the sheer massiveness of the grounds, and then the grandeur when you walk into every room. I mean, every room is like shining gold, reflected. It's beautiful. It probably could be disgusting to some people who think it's really too much, but I mean, that's the point. And we talked about this last time too. And it's every inch of it is beautiful. It's got minutia detail. I mean, I could just sit on the floor and stare at the walls and ceilings all night long. And now you can stay overnight in their hotel, which if I won the lottery, I would be doing that too.
Yeah. And it really, because you walk through, and I know everyone makes fun of tourists on their phones, but like eventually I just started taking pictures because your brain is like fried out. You're like, this is so gorgeous, but I can't like process. It's like you've like a buffet and you've eaten too much. Like it doesn't taste anymore. Like it doesn't taste like anything. So it's just so overstimulating essentially. And that it was designed to like wow and awe foreign officials and to kind of be a gilded cage for the nobility, because Louis XIV was one of the longest reigning monarchs of ever, of France especially, but of ever. I think he's like, it's Queen Elizabeth is even at, the second is even right after him. Like he was the longest in Europe, at least, like 72 years as king. And so he did tons of renovations, like constant construction. And he had like built this mythos, and monarchs were always dealing with like rebellious nobility. And so he made this world where everyone was vying for his attention at Versailles. And you see that in this movie with like when she's getting dressed in the morning and like all the like, oh, this person has to do this, and like all the different jobs people have to just like hand a glass of water. Now everyone's competing for that. They have these beautiful palaces in their ancestral lands, but they're here at Versailles fighting over who holds the chamber pot. And that's like a special position. And now the nobility are no longer rebelling against the king because they're so focused on social status at Versailles. But that also means they're even more out of touch with their populations, who they get their money and their rent from, and who the peasants are like supporting them. And so they're even more like, I mean, not that the nobility before were like so concerned with the peasantry, but like there's just even more barriers. They're all in this little palace, so isolated from the France at large, you know?
Yeah, you definitely get the sense of like the scope and the scale of it all in terms of the opulence, because this movie actually got to shoot on location in Versailles.
Yeah.
We talked about it, how for the 38 movie, everything was built on sound stages. Funny fact was that the ballroom that they built for the MGM movie was actually twice the size of the actual palace. But in terms of that attention to detail, being able to actually shoot on location does make a difference. So we have a lot to discuss. So
yes,
let's get into some details, and then we will jump into our discussion in earnest. So, Marie Antoinette 2006 is directed by Sofia Coppola, whose other filmography include The Virgin Suicides, Lost in Translation, Somewhere, The Bling Ring, The Beguiled, and Priscilla. This movie is based on Marie Antoinette: The Journey, a 2001 biography by Antonia Fraser. The film stars Kirsten Dunst as our titular Marie Antoinette, Jason Schwartzman as Louis XVI, Judy Davis, Rip Torn, Rose Byrne, Jamie Dornan as a star-studded cavalcade of supporting wonderful characters. A quick synopsis of our film. Marie Antoinette, the young Archduchess of Austria, is arranged to marry Louis Auguste of France, the heir to the throne. The film chronicles Marie's difficulties adjusting to the routines and traditions of French court, coping with the pressures to produce an heir, and her lavish lifestyle, which ultimately came to an end with the fall of Versailles during the French Revolution. The film was released on October 20th, 2006, which will be 20 years this October. Made on a budget of $40 million and making $60.9 million at the box office. It got one Oscar nomination for Best Costume Design and, of course, won the Oscar, rightfully and deservedly so. and you can currently stream this movie on Netflix and wherever you get your movies. So, starting off with our lovely guests, what appeals to you about Marie Antoinette? We'll start with you, Ashley.
Ooh, I probably got into this last time way too deep, but
it's okay.
I think what appeals to me is it felt like, and you can say the same for her husband, it just felt like a false setup from the start. I mean, she's just herded, she's just corralled, forced into an arranged marriage. She doesn't have an opinion. No one cares about her feelings. And no one really prepped them to navigate. Of course, like she had her own studies and what would have been considered for her status of that time, her own kind of teachings of what she needed to do for a lady of her status and who she needed to be married to and eventually become queen of. But it just doesn't really set you up for the realities of that duty, all the change culturally from her leaving her home and then being introduced to a culture and people that don't like her. They don't know her, but they don't like her. They don't want to get to know her. She seemed to have been, especially at the age of, I believe it was 14 that she was married. It's really young. I mean, I can't imagine doing all of that change at 14, being married, and then being pushed into a country full of different people that immediately don't like me. All of her friends, people that she would have grown up with, her staff that she would have been used to, even her, as you see, there's a scene in the movie with her pet that gets taken away from her. So the innocence that's lost just by forcing marriage that young and forcing all of that change and expectation, it sometimes feels like there is a very harsh and critical opinion that's very unfair. And it's not to say that it wasn't earned from the perspective of the aristocracy and the royal family being responsible for the peasantry class and the way of the country. They were in a lot of debt. Most of that was accumulated outside of the lineage of Marie and Louis. And they did not have what I would consider a supportive staff that has their own agenda individually and as a group of people that are not in the best interest of peasantry, but also not in the best interest of the king or queen. So they're relying on advisors and staff who are in those positions because they're supposed to be experts and doing it longer than them. And they're advising him in wrong directions. So I feel like it's a very unfair opinion to have of someone so young. And they did reign for a decent amount of time by the time that they were deposed, but it's appealing because of the innocence that's lost and the harsh criticism that they get for the way the country ended up having a revolution and them getting all the blame. Especially, I feel like a lot of it's put on her with the dismissive propaganda of let them eat cake, or as you see in this, she gambles a lot and she seems pretty like on the surface level with a lot of the issues that's then presented to her by some of her staff. And oh, well, I'll just ask Louis for the money for that fund. Or, oh, I'll just get the small trees instead of the big trees, because she's thinking that that's a good compromise. And it's an unfair, popular opinion that gets very glazed over from a history class perspective. I just happen to have a good teacher that at least brought up the opinion of like, this is false propaganda. And you have to understand it from the perspective of if you were that age, because in 8th grade, I would have been closer to that age. How would you have handled that situation? You're just going to listen to people around you that are supposed to know what they're doing and do what they tell you to do. So I don't think they were set up for success. And ultimately, it ended up with their lives and a lot of friends and family having their lives cut short. And I don't think it was all on them. So that's why it's appealing to me of the learned lessons from it, which are, it seems so far away from a historical perspective of like, we can't understand what it's like to live like that. But a lot of those political lessons, a lot of that propaganda, that's still present today. It just feels so different because of the way they dress or the way they spoke or it being a different country. But it's really not all that different. So I just find it fascinating the more that you can uncover with research that people are doing, that there's more layers into it than you expect from face value. And I appreciate this movie, I think, does, and the 1938 do a better job at putting that forward versus it just being yeah, they were a crappy king and queen who didn't care about their people and they were very selfish. That's not it. They were people that had feelings.
Well said. Thank you for that. Cullen?
I guess, I mean, I've liked her for so long. I think part of it is because growing up, I did like Catholic propaganda history, so I knew the bias was. But so they were very kind to like the French monarchy and the Spanish, and very hard on like the U.S. and England. So it's like I sort of had this bias from that. But honestly, whenever like Trump's kind of like going on, I get in this real Marie Antoinette hyperfixation. And I think it's because like when I first really got into her, it was like Trump versus like Hillary, not to get too political, but like obviously I don't support Trump because he's terrible. But like he like there's just so much demonization of women. And I think, like she is so interesting because she's not perfect. Like she's not a saint, but she's like just someone kind of doing what everyone expected of her. Like she's not even like the mistresses and under Louis XV spent more. Like this was a system that was inherently unjust and corrupt and was just reaching a boiling point, and she just happened to be the one standing next to the person holding the hot potato when it landed. Like she had some influence, but not much, not a lot of legislative power. And she was very conservative. Like she's not like a voice of the people, but her job, what she was raised to be, was to be pretty, to be fun, to be a mother, and she wanted to fulfill those kind of roles in her society. Like she wanted to do what everyone expected and wanted of her to do, but she had the issues with her husband. She maybe partied too much. There was no mistress to take all the heat. Usually the mistress everyone would hate, and then the queen was the good girl, but she got all that hate, and it's just because people love to hate women. And so you think about this revolution and think about our own time and maybe things we might need and changes we might need to make, and I think about like all the injustice, but it's like was the only thing, no, I shouldn't say it that way, but it's like what they used to unite so many people was their misogyny and their hatred of women. And they were very right to overthrow the monarchy because it was just an unjust, corrupt system. But it makes me wonder if are we only able to unite when things like racism or like because she's Austrian or like hatred of women are involved? And the revolution began as very anti-slavery, misogyny, like very like we're going to increase the rights of women. And then the moment they kind of got any sort of foothold, they were like, actually, we're keeping slavery. Actually, women belong as wives and mothers. So it's like this thing where it's like, I don't know, it's maybe pessimistic, but it's like, what is this hatred that like fuels us, and why is that the thing that we use to unite people? So it's just very tragic because she didn't, not to say she didn't deserve, because I like that. I mean, they did terrible things to her family, but the monarchy did so many terrible things to so many other common families that we just don't know about. But it's still really horrific what happened to her and her loved ones. Stuff we can't even imagine, like her daughter who survived and all the trauma she carried and kind of spoke about. And a lot of the creepy men who perpetuated the monarchical system would later, like his Louis brothers would all become king. Like they would come back with the restoration. So a lot, when they captured the royal family, it was mostly women. Like I was like, a lot of women suffered for the crimes of men. And that's just like, of course. And so I just think like that's why there's just so much to explore. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, we're all Marie Antoinette. Like us as like Westerners in our society have like so much more. Like we have somewhat reliable food and medical, obviously very different depending on where you live, your class status, all that. But like food and running water and stuff that were luxuries in her time, and new technologies, as you mentioned, like with fountains and stuff. Like she was in this bubble, just like we're in a bubble, and we don't realize like how our clothes are made and where our stuff comes from, and to what level are we culpable in that, even though we didn't ask for it to exist that way, and we don't want it to be that way. Like it's like we are all her, And so it's like, do we deserve to be beheaded because we are naive and sheltered and benefit from the corrupt systems that came before us? And that's something I think we can all kind of wrestle with. So it's like I think that's what makes her so interesting. And I think her biggest crime, which happened during the revolution, was she did work with other monarchies to try and get them to invade to free her family. And so she was conspiring against her own subjects. But she was like, they're gonna, can I swear? Do you swear here? You don't.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. She's like, they're gonna fuck up my kids. And so I want to save my family. And you know what? They did fuck up her kids. So even that's her, to me personally, that was her greatest crime. And it's like, but I get why she did it because you see in this movie a bit at the end is as the revolution was heating up, Louis really was just struggling. He was always struggling, and she was a little bit more. She was like a very ditzy kind of girly girl type, but like not that being a girly girl means you're not smart, but like she was not into reading. That was known. She was like, I'd rather read fashion books. Like she was not an academic by any stretch of the means. But at the end of the day, she stepped up and was like, I'm going to figure out how to save my family and how to get through this. She didn't succeed, but she did her best. Yeah. So I know we both had a lot to say, but I think that's what's interesting is because it's not just like, oh, she was a total victim. Oh, she was, like this shouldn't have happened. Because like, yeah, the revolution needed to happen, like this was a mess, but it's like always a woman who's demonized, you know. And Thomas Jefferson spread a lot of that in the US. And he, we all know about him and Stella Hemmings and all the slaves he owned. And someone gave Marie Antoinette a black child as a slave, and she didn't understand slavery, I guess, or she took him to school. She adopted him and sent him to school because she's like, well, kids go to school. That's what they do. So she so Austria didn't have like foreign colonies the same way like France did. So I think maybe she had a different relationship there because French slave trade was notoriously brutal. But it's just an interesting thing that the men who get to say things about her often did a lot worse things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they always say there's that old saying that like history is written by the winners, and I think that's often mostly straight, hetero, white men that usually are the ones that write that. Definitely. But thank you so much for that and all of your insight from both of you. Christian, what appeals to you about this movie?
How can I follow these two scholars? I don't have any. I don't know what to say.
You got to lead us into talking about this movie because we've been talking about the concept.
Yeah, we've been circling it.
Yeah, but this movie has so much to say. So
it does have so much to say.
Jesus are flowing.
Jesus. Yeah. What I appreciated about this movie, what appeals to me about it is the fact how Sofia Coppola was able to take this princess of a character and make her humanize her even more. Because what we know, I think I said in the last Marie Antoinette episode that my favorite thing to talk about in my history class was the French Revolution. I always wanted to make sure that we talked about that because I was always a big like Cullen and Marie Antoinette head. So, but with this movie, I always appreciated how Sofia made Kristen Dunst look smaller than she did when she is either zooming out of Kristen in the palace or she's walking the steps of Versailles of the garden into the castle. It's like she makes her seem so insignificantly internally smaller than what she is, because that's basically how she felt. She felt alone, she felt small, she felt inferior, she wasn't sure what her role is because there were people who were telling her what her role is, but she was still trying to figure out what that meant as a girl, as a woman, as a mother. She lost her child during how old was I that part always flew by me. I forgot that part. I'm like, wait, she lost a kid?
She lost two, yeah.
She lost two. I did not know that. Okay, there we go.
One as a baby, And the other was her first son who died right around like the Estates General and the Bastille and when all that was happening, Louis Joseph. So he was the Dauphin at the time and he had like a medical condition. So he had always been sickly. And so sometimes they kind of, for ease, kind of strip away some of the details of like the specific children in adaptation, just because there's so much going on. But yeah, so yeah, but she, as you said, like she lost kids, you know.
And it's for me, it was just so eye-opening to rewatch it because I have never really sat down to actually watch this film, and for me to just put on the gaze of like, I've never seen this film. How am I going to go into this? I was just transported. I wasn't expecting myself to feel anything, and I just felt so much for Louis and Marie. And I feel like the 1938 film is like a sort of continuation of what happened after they left Versailles, and then we see all that unravel after all of this happens. And I just really appreciated how it was always Kristen and Jason taking the lead. They didn't choose any other actors to play them, like aging up or anything. It was always them. But I really appreciated how they were able to show them through 14 to how old were they when the French Revolution began? I'm so bad with age.
Marie Antoinette was 37 when she was executed.
37? Okay.
She was, yeah, they're in their like mid 30s at this point.
So young.
But I just appreciate how they were able to take like I was just, when I was watching the last scenes of the film, I was just so cognizant and so appreciative of how they were able to make them look weathered, but still make them look regal at the same time. Like, yes, they've lost as much as they could, but they're able to go out in style.
Yeah, the 30s movie and a lot of other adaptations focus a lot on like the plot, I guess, because like so much happened in Marie Antoinette's life between the revolution and the diamond necklace affair and her, like each can be a movie in of their own. But this movie is a vibes movie.
Yeah.
And it's very like Sofia.
The diamond affair in this.
Yeah. It's like we're focusing on like what it's like to be a young woman. This is Sofia Coppola. She's the foundress of White Woman on We, or like one of the experts of it in her films. And like, so I think it's like she's capturing a very specific feeling of like being young and being carefree, in the way they focus on all these like kind of party scenes and quiet scenes. It's an emotional journey and a vibes journey, aesthetic journey. Even more than it is like about like plot beats, which I like. You know, it's like when you tell the same kind of story or character multiple times, it's fun to see different approaches to the material.
Definitely.
I agree. Luke, what about you? What appeals to you about?
Well, as someone who is a bit of a historical nut, I'm a bit of a eclectic historical nut because I like so many different things that I'll develop a hyperfixation and learn a bunch of trivia and as much as I can about something and then move on to something else. But I definitely, what I like about this movie and what appeals to me about this is definitely, I think, the attention to detail and going so far as to actually, like I said, shoot on location in Versailles makes a difference. Because I love the 38 movie. I enjoyed the 38 movie so much, and even though it was shot on sound stages, you didn't lose any of that sense of opulence. It's like how we talked about how that movie had initially intended to be shot in Technicolor, but because of the ballooning budget, they just shot it in black and white just to cap it and just be like, well, we'll just call it a day. And so it's like, so fast forward all these years later, we have the resources and the ability to actually shoot where this real life story took place. And the costumes are just so, the word is delicious. They're just so decadent. They're so well constructed. And the use of color is so wonderful. And Christian knows this about me. I'm a huge fan of watching character development and character growth through costume design. And so when you see Marie still in Austria at the beginning of the film, and then there's that sequence where it's the handover ceremony, and then she walks in Austrian and she leaves French, and the way that she has been completely dressed differently. And then because of the resources at her fingertips, she's able to pick out the different fabrics and the different things that she wants to wear to make herself feel beautiful, to make herself happy, because she needs a form of escape. She needs to, because the mental anguish that this poor girl goes throughout the course of this movie, it's there in the 38 movie, but it's hammered home so much harder in this film, because you really get more of the xenophobia in how much people hated her for being Austrian, thinking she was a spy, thinking that she was frigid, thinking that she was here with ulterior motives, and so therefore there's all this pressure on her to perform the best that she can. And so her way of coping with it is by treating herself and having all of these beautiful people surround her and going to masquerade balls and having parties and everything. And then once she becomes queen, there is definitely obviously a responsibility that comes with that. And I think that this movie does have a couple holes in it for me in terms of like story beats that actually happened in her life and during her reign that are just outright missing in this film, that I think we got better in the other film. And I think that other biographies and other fictional narratives have dramatized stronger. But it's like you said, Cullen, this movie is more about the psychological like experience of what it is like to, if you were a young woman thrust into this situation, what would it feel like? And it's more of a vibes movie. It is more of a feeling movie. And I totally understand that that was Sofia Coppola's direction. But as somebody who loves history, and whenever I see historical pieces dramatized and there's big chunks missing, that just doesn't sit right with me. But if that's what her vision as a director was, then I totally understand what she was going for, and she accomplished it in spades. So I have a bit of I enjoy this movie, but I take some issues with it, just a teeny bit.
Which bits are like, do you miss the most? Because I definitely see that it's like missing pieces. Like even most adaptations like cut one of his brothers or like reduce one of his brothers down. Like, so I get it. So like, but what do you feel? Like, I'm just interested, like, what moments are you missing the most?
Well, the biggest one for me definitely is because we talked about him at length, because he was the most queer character in the 38 movie, is the Duke of Orleans, and how just he's that like very like he's there in the palace in her life, and then becomes an active participant in the downfall of like like what's missing for me in this film is the actual revolution part. Like, we don't see the rallying of
Versailles for like 2 seconds, and then
the movie's over. Like, it's like we don't no, Christian, it's that scene where they get everybody in the town square using the music from The Wizard of Oz that gets people like rallied up, and like you don't see, like, you hear about the plight of the French people. You hear through expository dialogue about what's happening, and then she's like, okay, then stop sending me diamonds. And it's like, and that's it. And then I also know from at least my own research that a lot of these events that take place in the movie are rearranged in the timeline. There's a whole missing child, because she had 4, but this movie only depicts her having 3. And I mean, we obviously are culturally aware of Marie Antoinette, so we already know how the story ends. We don't need to see the guillotine, but I also feel like this movie sort of ends kind of abruptly for me. And also, I just personally, it's every single time that the score for this movie got modern, it took me way out of the film. Like, this movie goes so far as to be so attention detailed when it comes to the physical production of the movie, from costumes to makeup and set, and then you blast modern music. Like when I Want Candy showed up, I almost rolled my eyes. I was like, that's way too on the nose. Like that's so on the nose. Like I get the choice, but it's like, but why is this modern music bombarding this period piece? Like, did she think that we wouldn't be able to sit through a costume drama without like modern music to keep us like entertained? I want to get in Sofia Coppola's head a little bit. Like, it's, I don't know. I'm not trying to say that like one is better than the other, but it's like when you have a movie that from the 38 film, which I would have expected to be less historically accurate, because often when you watch historical movies from that time period, they're not accurate because we didn't have the history at our disposal. But in a weird way, I felt like I got more historical accuracy out of the older film than I did the modern film. So, and I mean, but that's just my opinion. I hope I didn't make anybody
That's
upset.
my opinion.
That's my opinion.
Fine, sorry.
But no, but again, I just think, and this is for a bigger, longer conversation, but I take this serious issue with when you present something as historical and then you leave important pieces of the story out. Most people that watch it are not then going to be the diligent student and then go do the independent research.
Yeah.
Most people will just watch something on television or in a movie theater and think, oh, based on a true story, I'm getting historical facts that are just dramatized. But then if you have pieces that are missing, if you have things that are made up outright, or if you're rearranging historical timelines, you then get audiences that will then leave thinking all of that actually happened. And I take a big issue with that, because then you're having people walk around with misinformation in their head. And also, like, I'm sorry, who put those Converse in the middle of the floor? I just can't with those shoes. It takes me out of the movie again. I'm sorry.
Okay. I gotta get, because I very much agree that like people will watch something and just kind of say that's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, like, to make a movie feel like a movie, you do have to, everyone rearranges events. But I do get what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with this directorial choice. I think it was, they were trying to, like, because Marie was so isolated from the revolution and everything that was going on. And, like, I mean, the Duke of Orleans, Philip of Galatée, and, like, his whole thing. I think, like, in the PBS show, it shows her a little more aware. But I think the angle this movie was going for was that she is so in her bubble that, like, she doesn't really realize what's happening till it's at her door, which I think is like a fair interpretation. But I would obviously agree that the Norma Shearer movie is much more like historically accurate, or like closer. They combine the Madame de Lamballe and the governess and Madame Elizabeth and like all these. So like every adaptation makes changes. But I will fight you, not fight you, but I will fight you on, because I get why you don't like the modern music or the Converse and stuff. Like, and my husband actually doesn't like he liked the PBS show, and then he saw this movie and was kind of like, I don't really like it.
I'll have to watch that show.
Me too. I can't wait to watch the PBS show now that I've heard
so
many good things about it.
It's really good. It's because he's not like as into the history as I am, but he's just saw me watching it and then was very like, oh, I'm invested, because it's juicy stuff. But I think what Sofia Coppola was doing was trying to be like, she's like a modern girl, like trying to be like connect to the youth, like she's a teenager. Like, so she's listening to the music that teenagers listen to at that time. She's a very 2000s like Valley girl. Like, I love bright pink, I love fashion, I love hair, like the way Kirsten Dunst, who was like a teen icon, kind of, like Bring It On and Spider-Man, all this, like she's playing her and she's playing this up while still like looking very kind of historically accurate to how Marie looked. Like she feels Austrian, but like she's like playing up the very like youthful energy in a way that is very like modern, but still true to character. true to her like sweetness and her silliness and the way that she cared, but like doesn't see the deeper issues. The way she's like, oh well, we just we'll no more diamonds then. Great, like that's very caring, like it's like us using our reusable water bottle when instead of plastic water bottles, but like the yachts and the AI slop, we're doomed. Like we're doing our best. But I think the modern choices were very controversial when this movie came out. Like this movie was booed in Paris. A lot of people were upset about the modern music. I mean, the French specifically were like felt it was too sympathetic to her, which I can understand. But like the modern music, the Converse, and like the kind of anachronisms that were sprinkled in intentionally. But I think this set the stage for a lot of what exists now. I think this movie is actually like a huge cultural touching point because whether you like it or not, like I haven't seen Wuthering Heights. I know it's also has its own controversy.
I just saw it this past weekend.
Yeah, like if you think of Bridgerton, if you think of so many shows, like the whole like historical romance, like the intertwining of like modern costuming choices and music with like old-timey themes and romance. I think this movie doing that was like edgy at the time. Now it feels so like normie and kind of like, okay, you don't trust us to watch a costume drama and be in the historical moment. Because I like those too. But I think at this time it was like pushing the envelope a bit and being like, let's reinterpret how we see these people as not stuffy, as young. And now everyone does that. So it doesn't have the same punch. But I think they wouldn't have done it if Sofia hadn't done it first or been a trailblazer in it. So, I mean, some people, those sparkly Bridgerton outfits make them want to gag. So maybe they're like, screw this movie, we're bringing that out. But I like some of that stuff. And I think this movie does it very tastefully and intentionally. I don't know if every movie does, but yeah, that's how I felt about it. Like this movie, I didn't think of it this way, but I was like, oh, this movie has a much bigger cultural impact than I think people realize.
I definitely feel like this movie captures more of the excess and the opulence than I think, like we talked about the 38 movie did. I just think in terms of the visual language of what they captured on film this time around just feels different. I think that the use of, I mean, like I said, it took me out for a second, but then it's like the montage of her, like, and her ladies in waiting, like stuffing their faces with cake and picking out different swatches of fabric and trying on every pair of shoes. It's like, again, what this movie is saying is that this was her way of making the best out of the situation that she was in. And I think also, and I'd love to hear either any of you chime in on this, but I definitely think that, like, all of the language that I've heard written about Marie Antoinette is that, like, this teenager that ended up in the Palace of Versailles in the situation that she was, but it's like, we have to remember that the concept of the teenager didn't really exist until the 1950s. Like, you were either a child, and then once you were, like, physically and sexually mature, and I'm putting that in quotations, you were considered an adult. But we understand that there is absolutely much more in terms of brain development, in terms of so the fact that this 14-year-old ends up in an arranged marriage to a 15-year-old, and then she's expected to start making babies and start running a country with her husband. It's like, so yes, the prospect of then asking a 14-year-old to do that is incredibly daunting and scary. And I can only imagine what that must have been like. But then again, what a 14-year-old is now is not what a 14-year-old was back in the 1700s. And one other thing that I will say that I go back and forth about this, is that I think that, like with Norma Shearer, Kirsten gives Marie a lot of humanity, especially I think in the quiet moments, like the moments of her, that moment when she, it's right after Louis's brother's wife has their first child, and then she walks straight into her chambers, shuts the door, and then cries. That is one of the best acted moments, I think, from Kirsten in the whole film. But on the other side of that coin, the modern cadence of her voice doesn't sit right with me. Everyone else is doing a voice and an almost like a character voice or an accent that feels period accurate that would fit in this movie. But then Kirsten is talking with the modern cadence of a 2000s American woman. Like she's not playing a character, she's just saying the words and putting on the dresses in some scenes. There are some other moments where I feel like she's stronger, and then there are sometimes that it completely takes me out when I'm like, oh, like, okay, that doesn't sound like what an aristocrat would say. That doesn't sound like you're putting on you're adding anything to the lines. You're just saying them. And again, it was only a couple scenes where I noticed that. I was like, oh, okay. And again, I'm sorry to be such the voice that I did enjoy this movie. There are things that just poked out at me that were like, huh, this is really odd. And like other people like Judi Davis disappeared into her character. And I didn't even recognize Jamie Dornan until I was like, wait a minute, that's Christian Grey. And then I Googled it and this was his first movie. But
and Tom Hardy too. I didn't
I was just gonna say he snuck in there.
Tom Hardy is in this movie. And
yeah.
And Rose Byrne as well. I was shocked to see that she's in that, because obviously I associate her so much with Bridesmaids and Spy, which is such a great comedy from, I think it was 2015. But like I said, I think that Kristen has moments where she shines in this role, and then moments that just fall a little bit flat for me. And I don't know if anyone else either wants to agree or disagree with me. I'm going to stop hogging the mic.
I hear you when you're saying that. I think some of the interpretation, and this is why it's fascinating to me as a movie to like keep watching over and over again when you know it so well and you notice different things every time you watch it, or you focus on something different every time. And so I definitely hear you, and I can think of a few scenes where I'm like, oh yeah, like when she's talking about let them eat cake, and she's like, that's so ridiculous. I would never say that. And it's just like you're having a normal conversation with her, and that kind of thing does stick out in terms of like what everyone else is doing and it being a period film, and then you're trying to be historically accurate in the location of where you're filming and the costuming and the makeup and the design, and that can take you out of it with the could be considered like harsher music that's chosen that's feels like a juxtaposition of like everything you're looking at visually and then what you're hearing. Some of the interpretation, I don't know if it's intentional from Sophia's part of it feels like some of the choices of things that were removed, or that there isn't so much focus like the 1938 with the buildup for the revolution and then the fallout of the family and what happens in the revolution. I wonder if it was a choice of really trying to show it from, and I haven't read the biography, but from Marie's perspective of a foreign outsider perspective, where you get the harshness of, well, she stands out. I don't know if that was intentional by the way that she chooses to deliver lines or the lines that she's given, or maybe she wanted to do an accent. They were like, no, you know what? We don't want you to do that, because they want it to seem like she is a foreigner coming into something that's already settled. Everyone has a culture, everyone has a fit, and she's trying to find her fitting. Or the fact that they don't put so much of the revolution into it because it's only in the bubble of what we see as we are captured as an audience at Versailles. I mean, very rarely are we ever taken outside the gates of Versailles, other than when we see people at the gates, breaking through the gates of Versailles and coming into the estate, or that we hear of what had happened on the roads or in America or this or that, or all the gossip in the halls. I mean, we're very much with her every single moment and beat of it. So it feels very much like we're meant to stay in that bubble and only see it from the very small perspective that they would have had, whether they chose to have that perspective and put blinders on, or because advisors weren't telling them the full truth, which they very much show in like one of the boardrooms where they're talking about the further taxation on the peasantry class, so they could join the American fight. Thanks, help us for the revolution, which we won because of their help. And you even see Louis make the effort to say, well, you know, kind of what's the consequences on that? Because like, can we even afford to do that? And they're like, taxes will be raised slightly. Definitely watch this too much. and it's so dismissive. And you're like, that is very much a tone that we see, not to get political. I would say in any political system in any country, that's very much the same tone. So in some of those cases, it feels like the tone makes sense because it's more relatable to maybe some of the audience that's watching it, that this could be their first period piece that they're watching. And I do agree from your perspective of this is not necessarily, if you don't know who she is, you've never heard of her or the French Revolution before, I would personally not recommend it to be your first introduction. But for some people, it might be a better transition into opening that type of filmography and that type of historical event, because maybe it feels more relatable than like when you're getting the history lessons, reading it out of a textbook, and it just feels way outdated and out of touch and something that feels so foreign from whether it's a cultural or just like an age perspective. So it feels like some of it was intentional, or at least that's the perspective I choose to have, whether or not that was intentional, of it feeling very much like it's not meant to be historically accurate, more of what they were surrounded by, or what the little bits of the reality that they could see from their perspective, because they never really left that bubble. I do agree it would have been nice, I think, to have a better conclusion, because the ending does feel very abrupt. Obviously, that was a choice. And that's why my biggest preference of the 1938s, because you do get that conclusion that really like hits and drives home. If you hadn't felt anything the whole time, you would feel something at the end of it by that scene, but you don't really get that here. And again, it's more of like the assumption that maybe you're going into it already knowing what happens. And so your focus isn't what's A, B, C, and D of the conclusion, and more of like, how did we get there? How did she feel? What snippets did she see or experience or not exposed to? So that's just kind of my take on it. But I totally get that this also sometimes feels very surface level and very aloof and fun, and feels like sometimes it glazes over real issues.
I also, and Christian, I'd love to hear how you feel about this, but I also feel like this movie, going into it, again, because the 30th film was so fresh in my mind, I loved how when we were having our discussion for that film, we had this sort of observation that the marriage between Louis and Marie almost felt like there was this friendship foundation to their marriage, and it almost felt like the movie was coding it as a lavender marriage. But this film, there is no chemistry between Louis and Marie. It is so awkward, and I think that that's where, again, we fall back into that escapism of her trying to cope with this unhappy marriage. And I felt like most of the things, and I honestly feel like the 38 movie is a little bit more queer than this film is. It's like the coding and the subtext of it is more, I think, prominent in the 38 film personally. But that was just one of my also like takeaways from this as well.
No, I agree. I mean, I personally, growing up, I feel like I watched the 38 version more than I did this one, because I really appreciated, I've only seen this version, like this would be like the second time that I've seen it, because I don't really, while it is pretty to look at, I just don't really see any substance to it. Yes, it is not historically accurate, but the fact that the costumes kind of make up for that historical accuracy kind of does it for me. But at the same time, I much more appreciated the relationship between Louis and Marie in the 38 version rather than this one, because it's like you don't feel not 1 ounce of love between Marie and Louis in this version. And it's a shame, because, you know, I do kind of have a little crush on Jason Schwartzman now than I did back then. If any of you have seen Mozart in the Jungle, he's in that show as well, and he's a pretty good character as well in that. But yeah, I don't really.
Hey there, I'm Tara.
And I'm MK.
And we are your resident Good Witch hosts of Down the Yellow Brick Pod.
Preserving and peeling behind the curtain on the wonderful world of Oz.
Come for the Oz fandom,
but stay for the company that's got you on your loneliest of yellow brick roads.
Through our juicy conversations, rabbit holes, and many Oz metaphors as medicine on the pod, we have tried to make sense of the wild times we live in and have traveled back to the turn of the 20th century.
To the heyday of MGM Studios.
To a super soul 1970s smash on Broadway.
The dark fantasy film era of the 80s.
90s ice skating and musical touring shows.
A 2010s reality TV search for Dorothy.
And much more, traveling through the decades as we cover all things iconic and obscure Oz.
For us, Oz has become a portal to continuously revel in history and human connection, holding space for this magical land we all have ingrained in us and the multi-layered rainbows we each are.
You can find Down the Yellow Brick Pod wherever you listen to podcasts, on Patreon for exclusive content, on Etsy for show swag, and on IG for an accompanying scrapbook to our episodes, community, and our guests.
Can't wait to hang over the rainbow. See you in Oz.
Have you ever thought, how does everyone know about this current book? And why are they running to the bookstores and libraries to get their hands on it? Or everyone's talking about this TV show, but I feel like I'm binging it months after all of my friends and family. Well, then I have the podcast for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Andrew Rimby, the host and director of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, an arts and culture podcast. We discuss here LGBTQ plus society and culture, literature, TV, film, true crime, academic conversations, and pop culture. You can listen to us wherever you get podcasts, specifically Spotify and Apple. Make sure that you follow us on Spotify or Apple, rate and review us, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
We here at That Olga Classic Cinema are excited to announce that we have recently partnered with the Gay and Lesbian Review, known as the GNLR, a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics targeting an educated readership of LGBT people and their allies that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines as well as reviews of books, movies, and plays. Each issue has a theme, and its current issue, Victorian Times, explores some of the 19th century writers who first put legibly queer characters and actions on the page. For more info, check out their website at glreview.org. That's glreview.org. And when you subscribe, enter promo code at TOGC Choice. That is TOGC Choice for the March-April 2026 issue to receive it as a bonus copy. All right, guys, enjoy your reading and welcome back to the show.
Yeah, I think they don't delve into their marriage as much in this one. Or like they focus on like the lack of sexual chemistry that causes the issue. And I think the 1938 one is a lot more like their marriage, their friendship, because they did have like this friendship, especially as the revolution kind of tightened their circle, they really relied on each other. And I think Marie was always so willing to play the role of wife and mother that everyone wanted her to play. And it was just so hard for her historically, and then in this movie, that he was struggling to play his part in that, and how much his insecurity hurt her.
I'm so confused of what this whole her brother basically had to explain it to her like using locksmith techniques.
Yeah.
Like, bro, are you really that clueless that you don't?
Yeah.
I think they said that there maybe in today's world he would have been considered some sort of form on the spectrum. I mean, back then I think they were more harsh of like he was slow, or I've heard in other historic testimonies saying that he would have been slow, or there could have been other issues mentally that it didn't click. But also, if you think of their age, like not everyone's predisposed to those feelings or interested in those things. And like, again, lack of education.
Yeah. there, the French court was this weird kind of place, and people did not have there wasn't a lot of warmth as much as they accused her of lacking warmth. So it's like, how much education did he really have? And her court life in Austria was actually a lot more like family based and intimate. So it like they were just much more comfortable with each other. So, and French court is so rigid. And so yeah, he just was missing that knowledge. I think some there like he did have some kind of surgery, and people are unclear if maybe there was like a pain there, or like he didn't fully understand like to finish in the right place. I'm trying to, like he just the mechanics of it. And then she, is raised to be this like virginal girl who's then married. And so like the man was presumed to have that knowledge. And so it's like it's just a real example of sometimes the world that everyone wants to go back to when it comes to like sex education and sexual freedom and rights. And you're like, this wasn't working for everyone. A
No.
lot of people were really struggling. And these are people with like the most privilege you can imagine, like literally considered to be chosen by God to rule, and they're still struggling. So it's like, it's a very interesting relationship. But I think I always felt that they were like the nerd and the cheerleader who got married. Like there's a
I
like
love
that's
that.
like that's the energy it brings, because it's like I think he thought she was very beautiful and charming and was very like overwhelmed by her, and she's like, I want to have fun, I want to party. He's introverted. Historically, she tried to like read his favorite book and was like, this is long, this is boring. It was written by a Protestant. Like, I don't want to keep reading it. And so she just wanted to like party. And so it's like they were just mismatched, but they did care about each other, especially like as they had children, as their family grew. They both really loved their children. And that's some of the tragedy is there are so many monarchs who like hated their kids, hated each other, had so many mistresses and stuff. And there was a level of mutual respect in that family unit that I don't think you quite get in this movie. Because I think it's so focused on her feelings early on, and then they kind of speed through the later half when she's kind of falling into her role as a wife and mother. But I think you talked about costuming, and like I think the visuals also kind of tell the story. You see how her fashion changes, how it gets really flamboyant, and we get like bird cages and ships and like the crazy dresses, and you get the I want candy sequence. And then she's like, "Oh, I'm going into my cottagecore era. Like I'm in my I'm in my like loose gowns." She's the OG influencer. Like she made these styles popular in France. She made croissants popular. Like she was, yeah. So she is like playing in the gardens with her family, with her daughter, who's the only character who speaks French. And
It's adorable.
yeah.
Props to that child. She was so amazing.
Best actress.
So cute.
Yes.
So she's
Here's
just,
your Oscar
Her
speech.
agent. Who is that little girl's agent? He needs
them-
one, please.
them cleaning the eggs and the like the milk and like her just little play village, which is so cool. And so like I would love to have this too. I get it. But like so she goes through that era, and then she goes back to court and is like in a less she's in like more jewel tones, like more mature outfits. So it's like they age her, and like she's becoming more aware. So it's like we see it visually in her journey, and also through the food. Like you think of like those elaborate kind of scary feasts, like when she starts and like everyone has to like hand her water, and like they're banging and like everything's huge. And then it's her candy girl era, and everything's like light and fluffy, and the huge cakes and the huge pastries and so many macarons that I just want to eat them all. And then you get to the end where it's like there's like a mini version of the feast, because like the revolution's outside, and like they still try and make it look cool, but it's so much smaller. And then Louis actually, because in the first scene, she wants to put her water down, or their first feast, she wants to put her water down on the table. And they're like, no, you don't do that. And then this time he puts the alcohol down on the table. Like he's meeting her, like maybe I should have been more down to earth. And so there's a lot of great contrast too, of like there's a lot of scenes of her walking down the same hallway at different points in her life. There's like the opera scene where she claps and everyone joins her in clapping, and then there's the scene where she's clapping and they're like, clapping's out and so are you. We're not clapping.
That scene when she was the only one clapping and she had to silence herself, that hit me. Because
Yeah.
it's like you're you're getting her perspective of this life that she was living and when when it wasn't going that well for her. And when she tries to go to this opera and no one is acknowledging her, making her feel so inferior and just giving her these death stares. It's like, the fuck? It's like that scene in Dangerous Liaisons. It's
I
like
was
with
just
Glenn
thinking
Close. That scene just brought back. I haven't seen the movie, but that clip I've seen 5,000 times, and it's like that scene just reminds me of that. Like that's like a predecessor of what this.
Yeah.
Like. And sorry.
I will say that this movie definitely, I think because of the time period in which this film was made versus the 30s, where there was so much more censorship, we're able to talk more overtly about like how everybody's obsessed with their sex life and trying to get into the royal bedchamber. Like it's so absurd. The like again, that pressure that's being put on a teenager to like sexually please her husband. And I'm just like, and I know from my own little research, but I'd love to hear Ashley and Cullen, you speak on this about like the concept of having mistresses and multiple lovers and like the fluidity of sexuality behind closed doors, but then at the end of the day, like needing to still fulfill your like royal obligation and duties when it comes to producing heirs. Having both of those live in the same, like occupy the same space of it's socially acceptable for us to have multiple lovers, but also like for us to like have like watching them like when you're getting pregnant, when you're gonna have a baby, it's like it's just like I felt like it was such two clashing concepts both existing in the same like social setting.
Ashley, do you want to go first? I feel like I talk so much.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I'm also, I would say it's definitely like a juxtaposition. And also then there's like gender assignment too, right? It's like in most, probably not in all, but in most cases, it's socially acceptable for the male to take the mistress or have multiple mistresses and have those rotate. And then in some cases, like in the French court system, to introduce them then to the rest of the aristocracy, be out in public with them and socializing with them, and everyone basically having to just shove it, their opinion, and deal with it and whisper. And this movie does a good job when you look at oh my god, why did I just blank on
Du Barry?
Thank you, Madame Du Barry. How could you like not see her in this film? And they do a great job when Marie comes in at that large table where they're having the meal and people are gossiping about everyone else at the table, but slighting the mistress of the king because she's sitting right up there next to him at the table with everybody else, including Marie. And she's asking about who this is, and you're hearing everyone else talk about all these other rumors, whether or not it's true of her and of Marie around the table, but socially acceptable for her to still be there. And then causes an issue of when Marie chooses not to acknowledge her and she bitches to the king. And it has to be a public acknowledgement at the most basic level. I mean, you can't, in most cultures, whether it's French or not, I can't even think off the top of my head a situation where that would have happened for the reverse gender, for a woman queen, a female queen, to have a male counterpart and ever be socially acceptable for the fact that anyone knows it or acknowledges, let alone publicly is shown out and about, especially because, then if she gets pregnant and then there's the question of like a bastard being born, maybe if they're the queen consort or the mother, and they have a son who has now become king, and they are maybe allowed at that point to take some sort of a male lover. But even then, I mean, that's why Queen Elizabeth I was so famous for not having anyone. I'm sure she did have someone on the side, but was it public knowledge? Probably not. And anyone that would have known or talked about it probably was removed very quickly. So it is kind of crazy to think that both can exist. King Henry VIII is another one that comes to mind of it being public knowledge of having so many bastard children. announcing ones that were not bastards and then saying that they are no longer considered legitimate, or even assuming like, if I can't have a male heir, let me just make this bastard not a bastard anymore, which is such a ridiculous concept. And I think this is why this marriage stands out, and whether or not the film does a great job of showing it, that this marriage was quite commonly uncommon. Another one I can think of is King Henry VIII's parents, who very famously, right after the War of the Roses, were married forcibly, arranged together to end the War of the Roses, and ended up falling in love. There was a show about that. It starts with the White Princess, and then follows through. I think there's also another one, a show about King Henry VIII called Spanish Princess. But it's a
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, they're so great. So that's another one that I think of, but it's very rare for that to happen, where they love each other, whether it's an actual chemistry connection and they don't take lovers separately and have kids, or it's like then a lavender kind of setup. And I feel like at minimum, the level, having mutual respect for one another, is all you can hope for with that type of arranged setup at that level of responsibility of king and queen, or a royal lineage, and then having the expectation of having kids. I don't think there's much more to expect from it. So I guess the concept of having some sort of lover, which she takes in this movie down the line, makes sense from just a humanities standpoint, but it's definitely ridiculous that it was never really socially acceptable for the female counterpart to ever feel that way and have someone.
Because heaven forbid women have a healthy sex life.
Right.
Heaven forbid.
Right.
We live in
heaven forbids it.
Even after, what surprised me, even after, like, you fulfill whatever, you fulfill the order of you needing to have a son or multiple sons, then just let them be. But like, you know, you can't poison the well. You gotta leave it open just in case you need another.
That definitely reminds me of more contemporarily Charles and Diana, because infamously, as soon as, like, there's a scene in The Crown where Charles's sister, Princess Anne, says as soon as Harry was born, their marriage was effectively over. And he went back to Camilla, and she had a revolving door of different men that she was with. But I'm really curious, since both of you are such historians, how, like, was it knowledge at the time of when she was alive that she was having an affair with Axel, or was that a revelation that happened after she died that we found out about their affair?
Well, so the Axel thing is like not hundo P confirmed, but it's like most people are like, because like it was very normal for kings to have a lot of mistresses, and in France, because France was considered especially luxuriant and promiscuous, I mean, still today, but like of the European courts, you know, so the king's mistress was like a job, which I think was a bit in England too, where it's like you have you make a certain amount of money, like this is in the budget, is the king's mistress, you know, like that's like a title at court. And so the French were so obvious about it in a way that like Marie Antoinette's parents in Austria were not. Like her mother was loyal, her father slept around, and so that's why the mistress thing was so shocking to her. She's like this little Catholic girl from Austria, like, why is the king sleeping with someone? But it was normal. So it was like the French hating her were just being mean, but like the aunts were notoriously not very nice. But the whole thing with Axel is the exact timeline is unclear, but a lot of people are like after she did her duty and she had the an heir and a spare, and it's like she's free to kind of play around. And the French were more progressive is not the right word, but like they were like more like the aristocrats had a lot of affairs, as men and women, and it was like bed sharing and swapping, and like it's just like a little bit of free love, and just like as long as you weren't too in your face about it. Like there was a famous story where like a guy catches his wife sleeping with her lover, and he's like, more like, why did you let me see this? Not like, oh, I knew you were doing this, but like you just need to plan better. Like this is awkward. Like it was like they were just like very like, oh, once you've done your duty because marriage essentially existed because in order to prove that the father's lineage was his son because the baby comes out of the woman, that's easy to prove. But like they had to prove through like controlling women's sexuality. And so like the more important the marriage, the more important that kind of lineage thing was. But the French were very like, once that's done, have fun, party, like take lovers. The aristocrats were very like questioning traditional orthodoxies and like being free-spirited, like kind of rejecting like the rigidness of like Christianity and the church and stuff and like kind of exploring. And then after the revolution, the aristocrats became very like, we're Catholic, we're this, because they were scared of like more progressive ideas because that led people to be like, well, yeah, if God doesn't say you're in charge, then why do I have to be poor and you're rich, you know? So they were like, no, God says we have to be rich, you know, like we're so like the French were a little more open, so there's a lot everyone knew her and first and were friends. I think people knew. I don't think it was like she wouldn't walk out with him the same way like Du Barry and Louis the 15th
Right.
would.
Yeah.
But he would be at her parties and he I believe it's in the Norma Shearer movie where her hair turns white, like the Flight to Varennes, where they're caught. In real life, he was the one who orchestrated that. He was like helping them along the way, and like so he was very involved in trying to save her. So people knew they were good friends, and it was just kind of like anything that happens on the side, and people were okay with that to a degree. Because like he wasn't even the one depicted in like the porn and like the scandal stuff that they made about her. A lot of adaptations will because it makes sense, like, oh, put the guy she actually had an affair with. But it was her and her ladies, or her and the king's brother, or her and the Duke of Orleans. Like they would make all this like shipping isn't the right word, but like propaganda of them sleeping together.
I've seen some of the imagery that was printed in those newspapers. It's very pornographic. It's completely ridiculous. I like that Rose Byrne is reading it. She's like, "Oh, here I'm sucking your toes in this picture." Like that. That was a funny moment that I noticed. But I did. There was one. I can't remember which because there's so many parties that happen in this movie. But there was that one evening where they were all running in and out of hallway doors, like couples were like switching rooms and everything. And I was like, okay, that's fun. And then there was a different separate party where there were two of her like favorites that were talking together. And I had the subtitles on, so if you don't, you're going to miss it. But they were talking about some man, and they're like, oh, he likes men too. And I'm like, oh, so we are acknowledging that there is like sexual fluidity that can happen in there. And how we talked about with the first movie, how the Rococo fashion was just so opulent and so over the top with makeup and hair and fabrics that it just lends itself to just expressing yourself in a way that's different than your everyday outfits. And I think that this movie definitely captures, again, that opulence and eccentricness of it all. And I think both Cullen, you and Ashley both definitely like helped me realize like a little bit better that this movie exists in her bubble. Like the reason that we don't see the revolution happening is because we're not leaving her bubble. Whereas in the 38 movie, we were more privy to things that were happening outside of her POV. And I think that tells a broader story. And I think that if this movie gets you interested in wanting to learn more about Marie Antoinette, then please go watch more things about her, but don't let this be like, oh, this is the one thing I'm going to watch. Now I know everything about her. I don't have to ever research her again. It's like, no, you're doing yourself a disservice.
More stuff that you have to.
There's so much more stuff. And
but I just have a question. I'm sorry. You go finish your thought.
No, I finished my thought. Go ahead.
No, you were keeping going.
No. What was your question? Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to nerd out a little bit here. The only recollection, the one thing that always goes to my head whenever I think of the French Revolution and France, opulency is one of my favorite. I'm going to be a really big nerd. My favorite Doctor Who episode is The Girl in the Fireplace.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about this timeline.
Madame de Pompadour.
And I'm like, I had to look this up because I'm weird. I keep thinking that Madame de Pompadour knew Marie Antoinette. And I'm just like, is that but that whole episode was very like, I love how they were like able to like make like a makeshift version of Versailles and like just, I love that aspect of the episode. But I'm just wondering which Louis was this that we see in this episode of Doctor Who? Like which one, which Louis?
Oh,
And that was the 15th.
That was the
Correct.
15th. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That was the
right in between.
Okay.
Yes, because she died in
She
1764.
died well before Marie Antoinette even became a thing.
Yes, before she was married into the role. Before she married Louis, Madame de Pompadour had passed away.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just Googled it.
I think she was older than Louis too. I think that was part of her
Yeah.
kind of mystique, is she was this like older woman and she had a lot more like political ideas. And so she was like very involved in court. And then Du Barry was after her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some depictions put the two together, like aspects of the two into like one woman, which is very much a disservice to both.
They combined
Yeah.
Du Barry and de Pompadour together?
Some iterations, not necessarily specific to Marie Antoinette, but around that time, sometimes they'll just like consolidate into like one type of person or aspects of both into one. There's like very seldom that really own to Madame Pompadour in and of herself separate. I feel like there's a lot more
Where's
on
her
Du
movie?
Barry.
Because I want to know more about her.
Is there a movie? Because she was
don't
very
think there was.
historically significant. Like she did a lot.
I don't know.
I think even more than Du Barry. I feel like Du Barry's kind of famous for clashing with Marie Antoinette and the whole like that thing where they're like, you have to acknowledge her, and she just says there are a lot of people here today, and then we're all good. Like that was real. But I don't know. Like I think Pompadour was involved in like wars and like culture and was like very influential, and Du Barry not as much. She was executed in the Revolution. And people contrast the way like she died with Marie Antoinette because she was like screaming, being dragged to the guillotine, which honestly fair, she didn't want to die. And Marie Antoinette was very much like, I'm gonna have grace. Like you're not gonna make me freak out at the end.
God, the one thing that not weirds me out, but you guys have seen the opening to Napoleon, the Apple movie that came out.
Oh, the one with Joaquin Phoenix?
Yep.
Yes.
It opens with Marie's execution.
That
Really?
scene takes me out of but they use a song with Edith Piaf and I'm just like, what? It kind of freaks me out that they're able to use this. She's one of my favorite French singers of all time, Edith Piaf. But to use her as a sort of balustrade for Marie's death really just irks me. Because it's like you have this famous French singer and then you have Marie Antoinette getting her head lopped off. And I'm like, this film is not historically accurate.
With Napoleon in the crowd watching her get her head.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it just takes me out of the movie. That's the only part that I've seen because I'm like, I don't care for this movie.
That one was a hard watch for me. I've only seen it one time and I didn't retain much.
Like, I don't think I can do it. Much like I don't know if I can watch The Tudors because even though I've heard it's an amazing show, I don't know if I can deal with all of that historical violence and all of that stuff that happens during King Henry's time. But I love Julie Richardson. I don't know how much of I don't know how good she is. No.
Napoleon and Henry VIII are very similar in their kind of like huge egos. And so they're much harder to sympathize with, but maybe we're slightly better at, I don't know. None of them were that good at running anything. But like Louis wasn't good at running things, but he's sympathetic because he wanted to be good. He gave rights to like the Jews and the Protestants. And I know we're like, that's like below the bare minimum, but like we're talking the 1700s, whatever. He was like, oh, we can have some kind of freedom of religion. Like, that's cool. So it's like he had progressive ideas in his own way. So it's like he's a little more sympathetic, and I think that's what makes, the tragedy of it is that he wanted to do right by his people. He just his own skills and the situation he ended up in, like he was the one caught holding the bag as it was just time for revolution.
Yeah.
Right. There's something I and again, my ADHD brain does that 6 degrees of separation thing where it connects things together, but I couldn't help but notice like a slight overlap of like because there were some people, I know this through my own research, there were some people that said, "Fine, let's abolish the monarchy and then we can just send the royal family out of the country. Like they don't have to be royal anymore. They can just be people, pedestrians." But then there were people that were like, no, if they're still alive, then that still means that the monarchy's there, so they have to die. And that kind of reminds me eerily of what happened to the Romanovs during the Russian Revolution that happened during World War II, or World War I, excuse me. And it makes, and that like, it almost like how, again, it's the wonderful way that the 38 movie opens and closes is with Marie's optimism about what it means, like the prospect of her becoming queen. And I will say that the second to last shot of this movie, where they're in the carriage and she goes, "I'm just saying goodbye," and the sun is hitting her face and she's seeing Versailles in the distance before we get that smash cut to their bedroom completely demolished and torn down.
That hit me. I wasn't expecting to get like eeried out because I'm just like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
In the course of 24 hours or however many days or years or something, because I'm like, when did this happen? What?
Yeah.
What,
Well, I mean,
what happened there?
the saying goodbye with the sunlight thing also, we had that whole scene where she wants to see the sunrise after her birthday, and that was such like a coming of age feeling scene. And then so it's like you think of all the memories that she's thinking of as she's saying goodbye. Them playing the name game on their foreheads, like all that so you feel it. Not just like, oh, I'm saying goodbye to this life of opulence, but you feel like the moments that she's treasured.
I get again, I love those moments. Like I didn't realize that they like had an early like 18th century version of headbands. Like that is such an amazing like fun. I love that they were just playing that where they would stick something on their forehead and be like, am I here? Am I a vegetable? Am I and I love that. Those again, I think that what fascinates us and what I think keeps bringing us back to Marie Antoinette is again going into that like world of royalty and aristocracy and excess and opulence. Those are the adjectives that I think are most synonymous with her and her experience and this entire like again juxtaposed with just how much the majority of France was suffering in terms of their poverty versus just how rich the rich were. And I think that not only this movie, but her story holds up because it's a cautionary tale. Because I think that it definitely is like, why should these people be living in such excess when everyone else is suffering? Like, that's not fair. But then it's like, but they're also human beings, and human beings don't deserve to get their heads cut off in public squares. Like, that's wrong as well. So it's a nuanced conversation. It's not as cut and dry as we think it is. Like, oh, Marie Antoinette was evil and everything. And one of the things that I appreciate about this movie that we didn't get in the 38 film was the whole let them eat cake thing, where she fully acknowledges, like, I never said that. Like, why would I say such a thing like that? And it was because people just wanted to sully her name. They didn't trust her from the jump because she was Austrian, and everyone just had all these preconceived notions, and they didn't like that a woman had any type of power or any type of freedom as well. Have a woman being that free in her position to be as ostentatious as she wanted to be and have as much fun. It's like the the society boundaries were so rigid that if she tried to flex her muscles in any way, everybody was going to point at her and ridicule. And then on the opposite end, she's like, okay, if we don't, like, if I don't accept these diamonds, if we don't show off all this wealth, then people are going to be like, well, then what's the point of you being queen? It's like the point of being a queen is to have excess. She's like, I can't win at any of this. It's like, that's kind of the big takeaway that I've gotten from my studies of Marie Antoinette. What were you going to say, Kristen?
The one scene that took me out of the film was when the advisor Stephen Coogan's character is trying to get her to care about certain affairs while she's trying to figure out if she wants a frilly part of the dress or a non-frilly part. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, is this really important right now? She's
Well,
like, oh, no, I don't care about all this stuff. Why don't you just give me the juicy details and then we'll get down to brass tacks? No, she's like,
Give me the
I don't
AI summary.
care.
Yeah.
Cullen, oh my god.
Well, that scene points that to something like the whole like foreigner thing, because she also said like, am I an Archduchess of Austria or a Dauphine of France? Like,
Yep.
what am I? And that was something that like her mother wanted her to mainly push for Austria. And then that she was kind of like, wait, but I'm the Queen of France. Shouldn't I be rooting for France? You know, and that was the position that queens were in because they were always foreign born most of the time. You know, the fact that Anne Boleyn, for example, was wild. You know, typically you're a foreign born princess, so you're kind of like a hostage essentially in this new country. And it was kind of like you're supposed to like show up, shut up, pray, and run your charities. You know, like the fact that she had taste and she wanted to have fun, and she didn't just want to like sit and run her charities and like be like a good girl, is why people painted her for something she wasn't. Like she wasn't even that for her time, like sexually excessive. Like people depicted her in all these orgies and stuff, but like historically she had maybe one affair and a husband that like didn't really enjoy sleeping with her. Like that's like what kind of a body count is that? I mean, that's it. I don't like the idea of body counts, but you know, like like just to clarify, but it's like people are like this whore, you know, and she's still depicted in a lot of movies as like this slut Marie Antoinette. And it's like who's left with like one, potentially two people, you know, who had some close, intimate relationships with women that were often seen as potentially lesbian. That was an Austrian stereotype, is that they were lesbian. And so that, like, her friend Princess de Lamballe suffered a lot for that reputation in the revolution. To what degree is kind of unclear because different people tell different stories, but I just don't doubt that people would be violent towards a woman they dislike. Like, I've lived on Earth, you know. I mean, flip about it, but like that's just like people, like I just see how people are, so I have no doubt that they would be violent to a woman they thought was queer or too much, you know, in any way.
I think there's a movie about that too for Marie in that lesbian relationship or
Yeah.
potentially. I can't remember. It's Diane Kruger or something. I think that plays the queen.
Yeah, there's one about her and the Duchess
favorite?
Polygniac where it's like a servant girl is disguising herself as the Duchess because they
Yes.
often people thought they were together, and it
Yep.
kind of plays with that. I don't think it's in English,
No, I think it's in
French or German.
yeah.
It's
I watched it with
Farewell, My Queen.
subtitles. Okay.
Yeah,
I saw that.
From 2012, and it is
Yeah.
a French movie. And yes, you nailed it right on the head, Ashley, with Diane Kruger as Marie
Good
Antoinette.
movie.
Yeah, it was good.
It's interesting to explore that too. But like so many rumors, which is also I think why she's interesting as a historical figure. There's so much still to be unpacked, and I don't think we'll probably ever be able to unpack it all, unfortunately.
And that connects us to now and like the constant propaganda we're infused with now, and like it gets hard to get to the truth of anything. I mean, sometimes it's just blatant lies, but like the lie, if you say the lie enough, people believe it. And then you have to treat it like there's some truth to it, even though there is no, like someone just said that. Like I can say whatever, you know, like doesn't mean it's true, but
It's it just goes to show how much sexism is just like unfortunately been rampant throughout history, and Marie suffers as a result of that. In prepping for not only this review, but our review of the 38 movie, I watched this amazing TED Ed animation. It's a series they do called History on Trial, where they basically will put a historical person on trial for the crimes that they are accused of in history, but then actually juxtapose it with like legitimate facts. And they've done Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, and Marie Antoinette. And listeners, will include it in the show notes for you to go watch it.
That sounds really good.
It's an amazing, TED Ed is an amazing series. I love watching their videos. But yeah, Marie, she did have as much of a voice as she could for a woman of her time and circumstances. Like, she encouraged Louis to get like vaccinated for smallpox, especially after his father died of it. But she couldn't stand in her husband's place and like try to like dictate and make decisions for him. Like, she was the wife, she was the queen, she had to follow behind her husband. And I think that again, it goes back to, I think, the decision on the filmmakers this time around to not have as strong of a friendship foundation to their marriage as we saw with the 38 movie. That I feel like when the violence gets rampant and the revolution kicks in, and Marie's talking about like, my place is with my husband, it's like, it feels like she's doing that more out of an obligation rather than out of the kindness of her heart, because she does care for him. Because I feel like we get crumbs of their relationship, whereas I feel like we get more of like a full loaf of bread when it comes to like the way that their relationship is depicted. I'm sorry, I'm using food metaphors.
A full piece of cake. A
full piece of cake. Thank you.
Tower. Yeah.
Yes. With because I really do. I love the dynamic, especially between Norma and Robert Morley, because I think that their chemistry is just so good. And I think that both of them just act the hell out of that first initial scene after they're married, when he tells her, like, I can't have children. And she's like, I just want to make you happy. And then that sets up the rest of the movie. But then with this film, it's like I think that Sofia, and I would love to have a sit-down conversation with her. Sophie, if you want to come on the pod, please do.
Come on the
pod.
Yeah.
I would just, like, I think that what she's getting across is just how fucking awkward arranged marriages were when you haven't met the person you're going to be married to. And I think that is, if that's the point she's trying to hammer through with the performances, then I think that direction, I think that she did it in spades, because it's so painfully awkward when poor Marie's trying to make conversation at the breakfast table, and he just answers in like 1 or 2 word answers. And she's like, I'm trying to talk to you. And he's just like, he doesn't know how to talk to her, or he's not interested in her. Mm-hmm. And what were you going to say, Colin?
I was going to say, and everyone blames her. Like, she's doing her best, and everyone's like, why aren't you being sweet? Why aren't you being, and it's like, girl, she is. Like,
not her fault. She's trying her best.
Yeah. I think Sofia is so focused in this movie on like early years Marie, and like the vibes and like the aesthetic and like the feeling of like the court rigidity, like how suffocating it was, and her rebelling and breaking free and like you get this very like introspective portion of her first kind of like third of her life. And I think when we jump ahead, kind of we speed through to the fall of Versailles, basically, and we're missing a lot of her growth. Like, we see it in her costumes and like the loss of her child, and like I think Kirsten is acting the growth, but I think the movie hasn't shown us the growth. Mm-hmm. So I believe it when she says my place is with my husband, but we missed that whole character arc of them getting a little closer. Like, you get pieces of it, but just the cake's not frosted, and I think if she had, maybe it'd be a much longer movie, and maybe then we'd lose the vibes and it wouldn't hit in the way it does. But I do think that's what you're picking up on, is that like we got this beautiful, like, it's a full portrait of one portion. It's like when, the meme of the horse drawing where it starts off really good and it ends really, like, it's kind of like this beautifully detailed first part of the horse, and then the middle, it's a little sketch, and then the end, it just like, it ends. Like, there's not a drawing there. it's just done. So I think that's kind of it's like so focused on her early life, which I think it hits so perfectly. But we're missing, even some of the different stuff. Like there's a lot going on between her two best friends in real life. Like there's just so much that this movie only kind of scratches the surface of. But I think it gives you a great emotional picture for her first portion, and then we speed around the end.
I just feel like because we know that there was so much happening behind closed doors, more than just on a surface level, those are the stories that I want to see dramatized. It's like that's what I want to see, and that's why I'm going to check out the PBS series that you two have been talking about because I want to learn more. I'm hungry for more to know about her, and I I know that I aired out my grievances with this movie, but I think to answer our question of how does this film hold up, I do think that at the end of the day, this is this movie is a lot like a it's like a portrait of Marie Antoinette. It's like looking at her life in very specific moments and looking at all of the rich like color and everything that's going on around her. But if you want something that's more factual, if you want something more detailed, or if you want something with a little bit more substance to it, then I'd recommend going to watch Norma's movie in the 38 version because I just think that this movie is icing, just icing and icing and icing for days. And I think that that's great. I mean, sugar is amazing, but it's like, but you could, but I want a little bit more substance with it. And I think that Marie was such a complex, interesting person that I think to cut elements of her true story out of the narrative for the sake of just having the vibes, I think does the real Marie a disservice. And um, I there are other Sofia Coppola movies that I love. I think that The Beguiled is one of her most underrated films that I watched recently over the last like couple of years or so. A friend of mine loved Priscilla. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to. But this is the film that I think is is up there with one of her best in terms of her direction because she set out to direct this movie as if you're in the mind of a teenager living through a real historical event. And I think she got that. I think that she executed her vision of that direction well. I would still just be really curious, since Cullen, I know that you've read both biographies that this movie and the 38 film are based on. What like just briefly, which one did you get more like of an impact out of in terms of like more of Marie's story?
I would say the Antonia Fraser one is stronger. I called the Stefan Zweig one Marie Antoinette Mansplained, because I felt like I got a very full picture from Antonia Fraser. I think Stefan, I think I agree with his premise was that she is nothing is like she's not Joan of Arc. She's not like some extraordinary soul. She was a very regular person in a crazy situation. So I think I agree with his premise, but I felt like he'd be like, okay, yeah, she walked to her death holding a picture of the Princess de Lamballe, like by her heart, okay, whatever, but here's a whole chapter about a guy she talked to once. Like that was his kind of energy. Like I just felt like he focused on things that like all the men and like kind of downplayed the women. And I think what makes Marie Antoinette so interesting is she's so like there's so many integral female friendships. Like there's Princess de Lamballe and Duchess du Polignac are like the two famous ones, but there's a ton of other women that she had close relationships with. Her contentious but also bonded relationship with Madame Elizabeth, the king's younger sister, who's like always cut but was with them till like the very end. And like her last words were the letter to Madame Elizabeth. So it's like, and they didn't see eye to eye because Madame Elizabeth was like super religious and Marie Antoinette was religious but not in the same way, was a little more open to progressive ideals. And so it's like she just had a very interesting she had friends from Germany who were trying to save her at the very end, like female friends. So she had such a connection of women. And so I just felt like the Stefan one was so male focused. But I read it all, so I mean it couldn't be that bad. But I like the Antonio Fraser one. If I were to reread
I
it,
have that one. I was
I would
thinking of
read
getting the
that one.
second one, but I said, oh, now that you've explained it to me, now I'm like, I'll stick with my Antonia
Yeah.
one. I don't have
Yeah.
that one in my library. No,
And
I'm
she's
good.
written others. I think she wrote one about Mary Queen of Scots and a bunch of other people. And I'm also a
And I
Mary Queen
do
of
have
Scots head,
another Marie
so
Antoinette book, by Evelyn something. It's called Marie Antoinette, the Last Queen of France. I don't know who. I think the first name is Evelyn. I don't know the last name of it.
yeah. They would have other kings, and sometimes those kings would be married, but they would never call someone the queen again. And they were because they were like, this was such an experience and such a cultural moment. They're like, we're not.
I'm
So,
thinking if we're able to quote unquote escape, do you think they would have been able to survive?
oh, if
Like
they
this
let
whole
them
thing, if they
free,
were able to escape, like get away from everything, like as the original
uh,
plan was,
I think
think they
yes.
would have been and live
Yeah,
the life that they wanted, like away from everything.
Well,
they
probably
would have
not the
lived.
way they wanted, but
Yeah,
Not what they
yeah.
wanted, but just
well, they
some,
would be alive,
not what they
maybe.
wanted, but they would at least
They,
have some
they,
semblance of a life, and they wouldn't, have to die at the hands of these crazy ass people.
I
they
think
would
they would
have.
have had to completely leave the country and
Yeah,
never step foot back. And even then, someone might still be that mad to go find them and hunt them down, or someone betray
yeah.
them.
They would live in exile. They would most likely have come back with an army to try and or like be reinstated in some way, like his brother was. And I think if they had survived, that could have worked out. Um, I think there were people who still kind of supported the monarchy. I think just the system was so untenable and everyone was so starving that when you're hungry, and they were like we just like people were willing to do anything, and I don't blame them because they were in such a terrible situation. So I think if they had gotten out, they might have invaded, and then we might tell a very different story about them because they'd be the people that attack their own people to regain the throne. Um, so who knows? They would not have let them go. I know people are like, maybe just let them go, but like as long as they're alive, they do pose a threat because they are the rightful heirs. Like the same with the Romanovs. And that's a whole thing. Like Louis was obsessed with Charles Stuart, his ancestor, who was an English king who was beheaded, and his kids were always trying to get the throne back, and they did. And then you have like Alexandra Romanov was obsessed with Marie Antoinette. So it's like a weird thing where it's like you become what you're obsessed with. Like they're both obsessed with beheaded people and they also died. And it's so tragic what happened to the Romanov family, even though again, like Russia was even worse than France when it came to that
10
income
times worse if
inequality.
you think about it, because I was actually rewatching the 1997 Anastasia film, and I'm just thinking that whole scene Once Upon a December, I'm just like, that whole ghost sequence is like really eerily chilling. Because
Yeah.
you have these ghosts coming back. You have her sisters, her father, her mother coming back to her. I'm like, girl, they died.
They died
That's
and
what I think about, like when I went to Versailles and when you go through like the hall mirrors and all the other rooms.
yeah.
I mean, that's what kind of just hits me of like, okay, this is not just like a little museum that's cute and that you can like walk around in a pretty dress. Like people lived here, people died here.
Yeah.
People were like ripped out of these walls.
And this wealth was built on the suffering of both the peasants, both the exploitation of colonialism, like that's, the colonial period. So it's like this wealth always exists on the off the backs of someone else. And then even like you think of today, I believe our income inequality in the US is technically greater than between the peasants of France and the monarchy there.
Which is insane.
Yeah, that's just insane. Like and we see people gilding people. We know who I'm talking about, gilding DC, and DC's the whole point of DC was it wasn't supposed to look like Versailles. Like it wasn't supposed to look like a monarchy, which they used that wealth to be like, I am chosen, like bow to me. Like we were a people's republic. Who are the people like white? Like the US has its own history, Lasai. But yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Someone bring me to focus. Yeah.
No, I was actually gonna say, because Christian knows this, my biggest historical fixation is the Titanic. And I've been to the artifact exhibition in Vegas 3 times. And when you actually see those like real pieces of like china and luggage that belong to those people, you feel their presence. And I can't even imagine what it must have been like to walk in what would have been Marie's shoes, like retracing her steps, like in the palace in Versailles, in her little, that cute little
The
chateau,
village.
the village and everything. Like
The Petit Trianon.
Yes.
Check out my Instagram. You'll see plenty of pictures. Yeah.
But she's, again, it's that, I mean, there's there's a reason why we keep coming back to sorry, my voice. There's a reason that we keep coming back to her, because she's so fascinating, and she's so much more than just this woman that wore fancy dresses and told the peasants to eat cake. It's like there's so much more happening there that did happen there. And I think that every single time that you take a historical person and you analyze them, whether it's through a nonfiction narrative or a fictional dramatization, you get new layers that we get to see, things that we didn't know because we weren't privy to the information, but now we have more information about. But like you said, Colin, I think that with this movie's direction, it was not necessarily, and this is again literature that I've read about Sofia's vision for the movie, was not to do this big sweeping historical epic, but rather telling this story through her POV and like showing more of the psychological side of what this was for her. And I think that is what this film does capture, I think.
100%.
The isolation bubble, the desire to be the perfect wife and the perfect queen, and not being able to tangibly grab onto that because it's more complicated than just an assignment from your mother to then go marry the Dauphin and then do all the things that she wants you to do in a checklist. It's like, she was a person, and she was a wife, and she was a mother, and she was a woman who had so much going on in here and in here that I just, like I said before, I love it when we get to see more of a real historical event, but I think it's just as fascinating to peek into the mind of that person, even if we do have to make up certain things. But I think that it's really important that we keep these stories alive, because there's lots of things that we can take from all of this. There's cautionary tales, there's human tragedy and all of it, and excess and wealth and fun and everything that she brought with her reign. So there's lots of things to take away from this movie.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to forget your history, obviously, but I think something about Marie Antoinette and the French Revolution, it just makes me think so much about good and evil, about uprising, about wealth inequality, about virtue, religion, like all these things. It just touches it all. And there's so many places, if you go to France or Paris, that not just Versailles, that have like Marie Antoinette stuff. Like if you go, you can see the Conciergerie, and they made like a chapel where her cell was. You can see the Chapel Exploitaire that her daughter built. That's like where they were buried after they were beheaded. And it's like a chapel with like big statues of them and like her last words. And you can go to Basilica Saint Denis, where they buried their remains. It's questionable if it's actually Louis and Marie's remains, but there's like a big monument to them. And that maybe was the time I saw it, but the stained glass was hitting just right. So I definitely recommend, because Notre Dame is beautiful, but it's so crowded, so still see it. But Basilica Saint Denis was like even more gothic and even more like the first part is just a regular church and the second part's a museum. And so it's less of like Notre Dame is like just people funneling through the whole time. Still gorgeous, but like de Saint Denis was a little more like quiet, and you can kind of go at your own pace and look at everything and walk around. You can see like the big monument of Louis and Marie. Yeah, so
that's on my bucket list to go.
Same.
You can find good deals on Expedia. That's my hot tip.
It's a little pricey right now, because I may or may not have tried to plan one for my birthday at the end of September, and we were not about to spend like $4,000 on flights.
Oh yeah, no, no, no. I've never done
But
that. But it's you the
so
timing
worth it.
is, but also it's because of it's a side effect of terrible wars that affect other people
Mhm.
even more than us, but we still face some
Yeah.
consequence price. Yeah.
Talk about excess.
Yeah, talk about excess. Yeah, and talk about making women suffer for the crimes of men. Those schoolgirls.
How
I just
far away
want to
is
go to Paris.
how far away is Versailles from Paris?
It's on the train, so
Yeah.
uh it's
Like 2 hour? 1 hour?
no. It's like maybe 1 hour. It's like the farthest point on like the yellow line that it like the farthest point is Versailles. But it's still within like the central Paris system. Now it depends on like what kind of Metro Pass you have. The first time I went, it was the Paralympics, so it was like the tail end of the Olympics, so they had simplified everything because there's just so many people visiting, so it was just one pass for the whole train thing. The other time I went, like in May this year, it was more complicated, but it's on the Metro. You just scan your pass and you're in, and it goes down like it's like the last stop, and you get off the stop and you're kind of right there. I think you can drive there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's within like the big metro system.
And is it more like, is it kind of like a standard museum that you arrive and you go at your own pace, or is it more like a guided tour through Versailles?
You could do both. I mean, it's been a long time since I went, but they were assigned tours, which probably you have to book in advance now. You can also stay overnight, and I know if you stay overnight, there's other things that you can do. You can stay longer in different parts of Versailles after when it's kind of closed to the public who are not staying overnight, which is a bonus. And I've seen some very gorgeous videos of people walking around in a non-ish traditional costume because they're very specific. They don't want you dressing up. If you're not there for like a costume ball, if you're there for a costume ball, it's different. But if you're staying overnight at the hotel, they don't want you dressing up in period.
Instagram person that I follow, it's her, and her thing is is it Amsa Darling? She was just at Versailles, and she was. I think they were doing the
one of the
one of these costume balls things, and she went and stuff.
Her stuff
I
is great.
love her. I love her costuming.
Her stuff is great.
But if you just go, you do have to get a reservation ahead of time. And it is restricted. Like you can't walk around that. You can see the chapel, but you can't walk in. But sometimes they do concerts there. It's like they have a whole system. So it's like you get the reservation, and then there's a separate reservation for the Trianons and the gardens, and then or the Trianons and the Petit Hameau, and then the gardens are another ticket, depending on if there's a fountain show or not. So we had to pay separately to go in the gardens. There's a Versailles pass. There's also the Paris Museum Pass, where Versailles is included. You just have to reserve a time, but it also includes like not the Louvre, but the Musée Orsay and the Musée Cluny and a ton of other museums are included in the Museum Pass. So one time we did that, and so that's helpful. There's also I've never seen it, but there's like the coaches in the stables. You can get a reservation for that, and they open the tennis courts because that's where the revolution really began. There's like the tennis court oath, so you can see that as well. So you can do a whole day in Versailles, and then there's their theater. They do like operas there, and that's a separate ticket. And then I think they sometimes do like symposiums in the chapel where you can like listen to like a concert of classical music. So
don't they have an amphitheater? They use one of the fountain areas. It's like an amphitheater for music or something performances.
Yeah, they do like water shows.
Yeah,
yeah. So it's a whole thing. But Versailles itself, like, if you're in Paris, it's definitely worth like a day trip. It takes like a whole day, basically. There's a really good restaurant right outside where me and my husband got entree, appetizer, like one appetizer, two entrees, one dessert, and like wine and coffee for like, I think like €29 per person. So, and it's like right there. This was this May. And so it's like right outside. So it's like tourists go there.
Cullen has been roaming everywhere recently. I was only able to nab him because he's like, I'm free this day. So
yeah. My partner, my husband, he loves he's really good at finding travel deals. So I'm very blessed because he's like, we can go to Paris for like 10 days for under $1,000 per person. Here we go. And yeah.
And you made it. Congrats.
Yeah. So you gotta look for the deals. I don't know how he does it because I try to emulate it and I can't. But he uses Expedia.
See, now it just makes me wonder, like, just because I know from my research that obviously they had to get permission from the French government to shoot this movie in Versailles, but I can only imagine, like, the like what it must have been like for them to be like, okay, you have to, like, you have this many days to shoot, or you can't go in this portion of the building. Like, I want to know more about I couldn't find as much as I wanted to about the behind the scenes making of for this movie.
But there is going to be a documentary that's coming out.
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah.
About the movie, and Sofia,
I bet she'll go into detail.
Is like at the helm of this thing. It's her documentary, so she's going to be showing us how she did this, what the unifications were with knowing like when and where they were able to shoot the film. So I think it's coming out. I know it is coming out this year to commemorate the anniversary of this movie. I just don't know when it's coming out.
So we all watch and then we come back.
Yes.
Podcast or no podcast, please.
Yeah.
Also, I have a fun, just rapid fire for for everyone here. What was your favorite costume in this movie? We'll start with Christian.
This ball gown.
The black dress.
The black one for the masquerade. Oh, that one's just like, that's my spirit animal. I just love the mask also. Because I'm like, oh my God, it's a beautiful lacy dress, but then you have like the single eye line of a mask thing. I'm just like, that's beautiful.
I love that one.
And then of course Louis' cape in the background. I'm just like, I love a flippy cape. It just floats.
He had a cute little stitch going on. They kind of like matched-ish. They went together.
They did. Ashley, what was your favorite costume in the film?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question because I felt like her half the time. I don't know, girl, ruffles or no ruffles. Honestly, I think some of the shoes stole the show or the hair, but
I never noticed the Converse though. I don't know what you're talking about. So.
I didn't notice it until way later because there were so many other things to distract me. There's like a dress that she wears, and I don't know the material, but it's like some blue aqua teal color, and I can't remember what scene.
When she's waking up after her birthday party, and when she's
could have been
that chair. Is that
it? It could have been. I'd have to rewatch it to remember what scene, but it just, the color to me was so different than some of their traditional dyes and stuff that we're seeing. And I don't know much about. I'm starting to get into it, but I don't know much about like all the different colors available. I know for France and some of those countries, like they probably had access to a little bit more color dyes, and that's like with the trade and everything that kind of opened the door for a lot of that to become more accessible in material. But I just think it's such a gorgeous color and not one that I see represented in a ton of period films. Whether or not it's this time frame, you're kind of used to like red, like deep reds are a harsh dark color, which are still like hard, like blue was a notoriously like envious, any shade of blue was hard enough to get. And indigo specifically, I went through a whole rabbit hole hyperfixation on indigo plantations because there was a thing down here. I'm in North Carolina, but in South Carolina that was a huge thing, and there's a wonderful book about a specific female-owned plantation that she was the driver of indigo here on the American front during this time frame, the late 1700s. But I just thought that color tone specifically was not only gorgeous on her, because all of the costumes look great against Kirsten Dunst's complexion, but not one that I'm used to seeing very often. Like I'm used to seeing a lot of pinks, a lot of light pinks, and a lot of dark blues or a lot of reds. And I think actually there was one that Madame du Barry wore that was like a purple gown.
Oh, I remember that one.
And she had the hat. Oh my God, the hat with the feather, and it all color coordinated. And it's just like this deep, because purple is always also known as like a notoriously royal color. So that would have been, I don't know how historically accurate it was of something she really wore, but it's just is bold choice that makes sense for her as her character and personality coming through in costume, but not Kirsten's. But I just thought that was a notable one because it was such a gorgeous contrast to the colors and tones that they chose to have Marie wear, and also from dark hair versus light hair, which was always, me being a brunette, always a fun juxtaposition of like, okay, because she's brown haired, is she the bad girl now? She's wearing red.
Yeah, the Betty and Veronica. Yeah. Yeah, I think my favorites, there's the one they put her in when she first goes to Versailles, like that light blue. It's very like princessy. And the hat, I think of that one a lot. I think of, there's one that has like a big like not mink, like the feathers almost. It's like a pink number with like these crazy feathers that are definitely not period. And she's like, when she's like sitting in church and she's like, "Rrr." I love that one because it's like, it's not accurate, but it captures her essence. But that and like the light blue one and of course her cottagecore era when she's like, "I'm free, I'm natural." She looks so good, you know. But everything's so good in this movie. These are top tier, like, of all time costumes, I would say.
Yes. My favorite my favorite costume I think probably is when it's right after Marie and Louis get married, and then they're waltzing or they're dancing in front of that huge congregation. She has that very wide. It's like the trap that comes out of her dress. It's very silver. It's so pretty. I think that was really, really gorgeous. I also really liked Rose Byrne's costumes. I think that she looked great in her outfits. But my favorite hair and makeup moment was when it was the fantasy of when she's in the bathtub and says, "Let them eat cake." The face was beat. Like the black lip with the eyes and her makeup. I was like, this is everything. And of course they picture her in this like crazy makeup look, but then she like they cut over to her in her room and she's like no makeup on, and I'm like, oh, she's like, that's such nonsense. But I'm like, I love that they dolled her up for that moment. I thought that was funny. But yeah, going back to it, this was its sole Oscar nomination, but the competition it had for costume design that year. So you had The Curse of the Golden Flower, which I've never seen, but then you have The Devil Wears Prada, Dreamgirls, The Queen, and then ultimately the winner, which was Marie Antoinette. And if it wasn't going to be Marie Antoinette, then obviously I would have given it to The Devil Wears Prada, but this movie completely deserved it because also the amount of extras that had to be costumed as well. In terms of everybody being in costume, and just the amount of different clothes that she wore in pretty much any time she entered a room, she was wearing something different. But
and the hair is such a big part of the costuming in this movie too. Like it's not just
this one right here.
It's
for her birthday. This is a great one. And then when her gay hairdresser was doing her hair and putting birds in it, and then it was like this tall. I was like, this is this is camp. This is the moment. I'm enjoying this part.
When her hair is gonna fall in the fire and he like puts the candles out behind her. Great.
It reminded me, Ashley, we're still waiting on that old picture that you said that you
took when
you got a Marie Antoinette wig and you crafted.
I'll send it to Christian. You can add it in.
We'll put it in the thumbnail.
That's what we'll do. That's what I'll do.
Just blur out my face.
No. I'm sure it looked amazing. Well, this has been
much fun.
This was such a great conversation. Thank you both so much for coming on. Ashley, thank you for coming back. Cullen, thank you for joining us. This was so much fun talking about this movie with both of you, and of course with you, Christian. This was amazing. This was the best ball party that we've had in a long time.
So happy to be invited to the ball.
But listeners, viewers, thank you so much for checking out that old gay classic cinema and our review of Marie Antoinette. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok for all of our updates. Please subscribe if you're listening in your AirPods. Listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and of course, subscribe to us on YouTube for the visual component that comes with every episode, and hit the bell notification so you get updates every time we post. And we'll leave everyone's links in the description down below. But until next time, thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Only